Hello, everybody. I'm Charlie Peppers. I'm from Brooklyn. I've been in Los Angeles for 9 years and very, very deeply committed to racial justice work and a lot of the nonprofit housing justice work that our organization does. I'm the coordinator for the Everyone In campaign, which is underneath United Way. Caleb, my colleague and friend, brought me into the fold, and now I just can't quit them. And it's all his fault because they're doing such good work.
I love it. Yeah, thank you all so much for having us, and thank you for showing up today because it's amazing. I love that there's like nearly 30 people on this call that have showed up to do good work today. So thank you, thank you. Give a hand for yourselves. I love it. Yeah, my name is Caleb, he, him. As Charlie mentioned, we work for, as Marissa mentioned too, we work for Everyone In, which is a campaign through United Way. And we've done some really, we've had the opportunity and the pleasure of getting to work with LA Works over the course of the past year, many times, just talking about housing justice and talking about the intersections with racial justice and all sorts of different things, and it's been amazing. And what we specifically focus on at Everyone In, maybe you're familiar, maybe you're not, but we'll tell you really quickly, is that we do housing justice work, but specifically we organize in communities all across LA County to build supportive housing and affordable housing, and we work with folks like yourselves and other community members to build support for different developments. And so that's what we do. But currently, because as you know, we don't have nearly enough resources to be addressing a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, or specifically, we don't have nearly enough resources to be building this affordable housing or building supportive housing or making direct community investments that would really help address the inequities that we see. We've been working on a campaign called Measure J, which is why you're here today, which is really exciting. I see Nisha like, yeah, what's good? So yeah, maybe we'll just like, was somebody saying something? Maybe we'll just hop in. I think I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk you all through a little bit. Maybe just quickly, I want to see, and I'll put myself on gallery view so I can see all of you. Who actually knows what Measure J is? Do you know anything about it? Have you heard about it? It's totally okay if you don't. In fact, maybe better if you don't, because we're going to be teaching you today. So it looks like a lot of people have not heard about it. This is going to be really great. So we're going to share our screen and we'll go through a slideshow, as Marissa mentioned earlier, or sorry, that was actually our breakout, I think, but we'll have time for questions. So like if folks are confused or things need explanation, like we'll go through it. We're happy to answer any questions that you have to make sure that you feel prepared when we actually do the action a little bit later today. So do not fret if there's something that you do not understand, or like, that does not feel clear to me, Caleb, Charlie, we are here for you. We are in the struggle together, and we'll make sure that you get the resources you need. All right. All right, does that look good to everybody? You can see it? Awesome. Because I have embarrassed myself before and I like pull it up and I think I'm good and I'm like 10 slides in and someone's like, Caleb, I cannot see what you're talking about. All right, great. Do you want to kick us off, Charlie? You want me to kick it off?
You kick it off, and then I'll bounce in after you.
All right, I will kick it off. So as you mentioned, it's called Measure J. So Measure J was formerly known, as you see up in the corner, Reimagine LA County. Reimagine LA County was basically a huge coalition of folks. It was Black Lives Matter, it's Youth Justice Coalition, La Defensa, obviously us, Everyone In, and literally over 100 different organizations came together in the midst of the pandemic and after the uprising to say, you know what, like we actually need to figure out a way to ensure that funds are getting spent appropriately in our communities. We need to figure out a way that we're making these direct community investments and figure out a way to figure out alternatives to the carceral state and to figure out alternatives to incarceration. So Measure J sort of became formed out of that Reimagine LA County coalition. And it was a bit of a stressful time, but we got it passed to the Board of Supervisors. So we actually have an amendment. We actually have a measure, I should say, that's on the ballot that's going to be on there in November. And what it actually says, which is really exciting, is we have a charter in our county. So the charter in our county functions basically like a constitution, right? And so as is the case with the Constitution, oftentimes we need to make amendments to those things, right, to make sure that those things are, or these documents are matching the time. So what Measure J actually does is it says we're going to make a charter amendment to allocate no less than 10% of the county's locally generated unrestricted revenues, which basically means like your general fund, to address the disproportionate impact of racial injustice by making direct community investments and investments in alternatives to incarceration. And so what that basically means is that those funds are now restricted, right? So the charter itself, as you actually will see here in the language, means that these funds cannot be used on any existing programs, and they cannot be used to put money into the carceral systems or to law enforcement agencies. So it's basically just restricting those funds to say these have to go to communities, these have to go to alternatives to incarceration. And what's really important to note is that this needs 50% plus one to win. So we need a lot of votes. So that's why we're super grateful that you all have showed up on the call today and you're willing to put in some time with us.
Yeah, and bouncing off of what Caleb said, as a person of color, and particularly a queer person of color, one of the first things that I was taught was self-policing so that I wasn't in a position to be incarcerated for something that wasn't necessarily my fault. So Measure J means a lot to me because when you are a POC living in a community where a large part of the culture is policing and incarcerating first before investing in our Black and Brown communities, you don't really have the wherewithal or the space to grow or to progress or to feel safe in your own community because you constantly feel that you taking a breath or you just being yourself or stepping into your power or selfhood is going to be a threat to people who don't look like you. That's why racial justice work is particularly important to me. I know that it's very near and dear to Caleb's heart because he's a strong ally. But at the bottom of this initiative that we have right now, that's the emotional backbone of it. We really want to give Black and Brown people in our communities more space to step into their power and to feel that the system is working for them and not against them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Charlie. And this next slide we showed here is basically just a timeline because I think a lot of what you might have already heard, a lot of what you will hear as we move through these next few weeks, exactly 45 days until we have the November 3rd election, folks have been saying things like, oh, this Measure J, it came out of nowhere. Measure J, it happened overnight. Measure J, they rushed this thing through. But frankly, that's just untrue, right? When we think about racial justice, when we think about movements, when we think about the struggle for justice, this is something that's been happening actually for centuries, right? But in terms of like organizing in LA or in terms of Black Lives Matter, thinking about the uprising, the mass movements, like this has been happening for decades, right? So you look at Black Lives Matter popping up in 2013, 2014, and then we saw Justice LA sort of really build off of that movement. And you had Measure R, right? Which is Measure R was basically reforming LA jails to stop the $3.5 billion jail expansion plan and to say, you know what, we need to invest in mental health and we need to stop having, because I don't know if you guys know this, but our jails, we have about 40%, depending on the jail, anywhere from 40 to 50% of folks that are in there actually have a mental health issue of some kind and need access to resources and treatment that they're not going to get inside the carceral system, right? So then from there, what we had happen was, you know, in the midst of the pandemic, you see something like Healthy LA spring up, right? To say like, okay, this is a mess. Like we have a pandemic, we have a public health crisis. We also have an economic fallout that's happening. People can't pay their rents. People can't pay their mortgages. Small businesses are getting closed or homes are getting foreclosed. All these different things are happening. And so coalitions were coming together. In fact, in a really historic way, Healthy LA, for instance, had I think like 360 organizations all across LA County, which is completely unprecedented because folks were saying, you know what, enough is enough. Like we need support, we need solutions, we need actual investments and actual protection for our communities to ensure that people are safe and they're healthy. So then sort of out of that, right, we have Yes on J, we have Reimagine LA pop up to say, this housing crisis is not going away. Like we need to figure out a way to change our charter amendment to ensure we're getting these investments put in our communities. I think this is an important slide because this is something that so many of the Black Lives Matter leadership say all the time. Dr. Melina Abdullah says this all the time. Catrice says this all the time. Like budgets are a reflection or a statement about our priorities, right? Where are we deciding to put our money? And I know working in housing justice or working in communities to help build supportive housing, something that we're constantly grappling with is we don't have nearly enough funds, right? Like we had an injection with Proposition Proposition HHH and Measure H. It was billions of dollars, but the crisis is so massive that it's not nearly enough. We need more, and we need to ensure that our budgets that we have available are reflecting our priorities and our values. And so that's just an important quote, I think, to think about.
Yeah, and bouncing off of what Caleb just said, one of the things that us as organizers and us as people who are politically minded have been coming up against, and a lot of you are probably going to nod really energetically when I say this, when we bring up defund the police, either on Facebook or Instagram, we just get back so much vitriol or concern. People just think it's going to turn into Gotham City all of a sudden because the conversation around defund the police, if it's very new to people, particularly people who are not Black and brown, the lack of specificity when the conversation begins is usually what trips people up. Measure J is great because it gives us solid talking points in terms of this is what this looks like. It is not going to become a outlaw state if we don't have police force or people who are just honing down on Black and brown communities. So Measure J is a really great way to, if you want to include this in your dialogue with people who you're trying to engage in your organization or community, bringing this up is a strong way to do that because it gives us something to latch onto, maybe to start off with if they're not particularly used to having this conversation. And also if it doesn't pertain to most people, we kind of have a habit of not really honing down on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great, Charlie. And I think that sort of speaks to this next slide that we're showing here. We're just talking about polling results and putting out questions to folks in our community or voters and asking them, okay, what do you need and what would you like to see? Would you like to see increased community-based counseling and mental health service? Nearly 80% of folks are saying yes. Do we need to provide job training and placement services to low-income residents? 72% of folks are saying yes. In regards to what Charlie was just speaking about, should we be shifting funding from law enforcement or carceral states to community-based programs? Nearly 70% of people are saying yes, and nearly 70% of people are saying we need targeted funding to residents and families earning less than the county's median income, which is a lot of folks, by the way. A lot of folks are earning less than that. So I think this is important to keep in mind because we're going to be taking some action today and you'll be having some conversations with folks. And it's just important to know that the majority of folks that are out there and the majority of folks that you're going to be talking to, even if they're like, oh my God, why are you calling me? They are like-minded, right? The likelihood of you having a conversation with someone who shares your values or understands where you're coming from about this, there's going to be a lot of those folks. Peppers, you want to do this one?
Yeah. I think a lot of this really does speak for itself because when you're looking at a lot of the specificity of who these issues target and why we do need Measure J, you're seeing that even though Black people don't account for a lot of the population, we are disproportionately targeted for a lot of the gaps in progress within law enforcement and mental health services and resources in housing and community. Also, I know we've all heard about the school to prison pipeline, but that's a big part of it. I think just not having an investment in our Black and brown communities from the start is how a lot of these things kind of snowball. And having a big handle on those issues now and being able to just start off, because Measure J isn't going to magically fix everything, but I think it's a good starting point for the big dialogue that our country's having right now.
These slides, by the way, clearly the formatting is not having it. My bad. This is definitely making it difficult. But these are just some incarceration rates that it's like showing you on the left, right? Like per 1,000 white folks, you can see this like tiny sort of bar over here. Per 1,000 Latinx folks, you have a pretty significant number here. And then you see per 1,000 Black people in LA County from 2013 to 2015, this massive, massive bar. So when we say disproportionate, that's what we mean. But when we say disproportionate, we need to understand just how great the difference is, right? And then this comparison that you have on the right, you know, we were just talking about investments. This is what we're talking about. I mean, currently our county's budget is saying that we would rather prioritize $230 million for homelessness and housing and mental health and diversion and reentry, which basically means diverting folks from the carceral state and helping folks re-enter communities after folks have been incarcerated, versus a $1.75 billion investment in district attorneys, probations, and sheriffs, right? So we definitely see a discrepancy there of what our priorities are. Yeah, and this just sort of builds off of that, right? I mean, it's just like puts it in perspective for us, like how much money we're actually spending a day. $206 per person a day, with an average daily pretrial population of 7,650 people that LA County spends. It's $500 million a year for people who have not been convicted but are too poor and too sick to get out of jail. And this is really important to keep in mind, because a lot of what we're talking about when we say alternatives to incarceration, we're talking about restorative justice programs. We're also talking about pretrial support, right? So folks who are awaiting trial, maybe have not been convicted of any sort of crime. We're talking about making sure folks are supported with attorneys. We're talking about making sure folks are supported with any sort of resources that they might need to ensure that folks get fair treatment in the justice system.
Yeah, this is another one that I feel is just self-explanatory. It also, I feel like I'm about to get on my Brene Brown tip right now, just because I've been watching a lot of her TED Talks and documentaries lately. But there's a lot of gaslighting that happens around this conversation, and the data doesn't lie. You're always able to look at this data and bring it up in a conversation with somebody who is trying to invalidate the experience of a lot of our Black and brown friends and family, because it really does boil down to the fact that I know that I said a couple of minutes ago that we need to get the system working the way that it's supposed to work. The system is working just fine. It just isn't supposed to work for people who look like me. So with systems like this put in place, we're really able to just change the conversation just enough so that there can be bigger impact and bigger changes. You know, start with this first, and then we can see a trickle effect when it comes to care, housing, jobs, and education. Because a big problem that we're seeing in the way that LA County handles our Black and brown communities is a lack of innovative thinking. It's a lack of innovative thinking. It's a lack of just really engaging with communities and meeting them right where they are. And it's also complacency and comfort and privilege. Caleb?
Yeah, so how will it work, right? We've already talked a little bit about this, and what we're talking about is at least, so this charter amendment would guarantee that at least 10% of existing locally controlled revenues, which would account to, it says growing close to $1 billion when it's fully phased in, which means over the course of a few years, because it is important to note that this is not something in terms of budgeting that could be fully implemented the first year. So what we're talking about is in maybe year one, we would see something like $500 million to $750 million that would be dedicated from this at least 10%. But it's also important to keep in mind if, say, for instance, other things like Prop 15 were to pass, right? Prop 15 means that we would be overturning parts of Prop 13 in order to generate more revenues for counties all across the state of California. So say something like that passes or something similar gets implemented in terms of policy, that means we have a lot more money available to us that's guaranteed to us in the counties because we'll have this, this protection in place. Yeah, I think that's basically it on that one. Yeah, so maybe just to talk a little bit about what, and we've already talked a little bit about this, but just to be specific, because folks will ask you this, and I'm sure you probably have these questions yourself, like what do we mean when we say direct community investments? Because it can be a little bit obtuse to just say, yeah, we're gonna, and it sounds like complete like political jargon. Sometimes we hear like bad politicians say things like that, right? Like, we're going to directly invest in the community. I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, we're talking about community-based youth development programs. We're talking about career training and jobs to low-income residents with a focus on jobs highlighted by alternatives to incarceration work groups. So that's construction jobs, that's jobs that support a decentralized system of care, restorative care village. And it's creating access to capital for small minority-owned businesses with a focus on Black-owned businesses. I think this is huge because I think a lot of what we need to be talking about when we think about equity is thinking about generational wealth and thinking about how we have prevented Black families or Black folks and brown folks from having access to the same generational wealth that white folks have access to. So this is huge. This is a really huge one. And then specifically, and this part of the reason why we're so involved as Everyone In, which is a housing justice campaign, is that we're talking about rental assistance, we're talking about housing vouchers, we're talking about supportive housing, affordable housing, we're talking about community land trusts, which also create real equity in communities, which is saying that, you know, we can provide money or loans to folks to actually be able to purchase parcels of land and build on those lands and own and operate those developments, which is really, really exciting. And then Peppers.
Yeah, this is big. This is big. I think that when we're looking at alternatives to incarceration and having all of these things on the table, we are looking at, like Caleb said, there's a huge majority of people who are in the prison system right now who don't have access to mental health resources. I'm actually going to add to one of the things that we don't see here. There also isn't a big amount of resources for our Black and Brown trans youth and our Black and Brown LGBTQ youth who are disproportionately targeted by the police system and put into incarceration as a means of just not knowing what to do to them. So something that I would add to this is adding more LGBTQ centers, adding more places where people who are fleeing from domestic abuse in their homes can go, adding more places where people who need access to hormones because they're in the midst of transitioning, and when they are placed directly in prison, that takes away their livelihood and that takes away their ability to really step into who they are as people. This is all great, and I think that this is a great start. Mental health is a big part of it, but I also think that I think that tampering down on how we can stop othering people who are also in the Black and Brown community and other marginalized groups that are part of that is a bigger part of the conversation. You know, because I'm in Hollywood, like Caleb is, and we see a lot of people who are young and just struggling.
Yeah, so I think just sort of like just to like bring it back and like summarize, I know this is a lot of information and we'll have some time in just a few minutes to actually field some questions if you folks have them, but to sort of make it feel concise or sort of distilled down to a few basic points. Always and forever is what Frank has written in here, which is very literally what it means. You know, I talked about at the top of this slideshow how this charter amendment is effectively changing the county's constitution, right? So this is something that literally will be there, assuming, so say for instance, there were some sort of like fiscal emergency or there was something that we needed to pause, there is language written in there to ensure that obviously that this 10%, if needed for some sort of like drastic emergency response, we can actually pause it. But otherwise, like this is forever, which is a really exciting thing in terms of investments. It's also a 10% minimum, right? So it just means that it's 10% of whatever revenue. So if we find other mechanisms where we have other pieces of policy that are increasing the locally generated revenues that we have in LA County, then that means we have access to even more money. So we're talking about a minimum of probably at least 500 million, but it could go upwards to $1 billion plus per year, which is a huge new injection of money that we would have available to the county. Yeah, and just eligible uses and prohibited uses, as we've mentioned quite a bit. You know, what's really amazing about this charter amendment is not only is it permanent in terms of changing the charter itself, but it also is restrictive in that it prohibits certain types of uses, as we mentioned, right? So this money cannot be spent on existing programs. This money cannot be spent on the carceral state. It cannot be spent on law enforcement. It is not directly taking money from any other department, but it is saying that these monies that we are now allocating cannot be spent on very specific things, which is a really huge deal. And what I also love about this is that this process is inclusive, it's transparent, it's phased. So what that means is that when we win and we pass this, yay, is that the community will get a say in how this happens and how this money gets allocated and how we choose to implement the programming. The Board of Supervisors ultimately will be taking votes on this, and they will have the final decision-making power, but the process will be open and transparent with the community to ensure that the investments that we're making are going to the right places and it's done in an equitable way. Yeah, I think
I
that's
love this
it.
picture. I love this
Yeah, I
picture so
know.
much.
Like the little face of the movement. I love it. Yeah. So I mean, that's like a get involved page. We're about to do some get involved, but I think this is really important. Just a couple of links, you know, outside of this action that you have today, if you guys want to stay involved with the main campaign, yesonj.la/take action. There's information all over the website. It tells you about the coalition, it tells you about all the things. Also, if for whatever reason you have some money and you want to donate, or you know folks that do, we always could use the money. You know, we're going up against the sheriff's union and lots of different folks who are saying no on Jay and are committing literal millions of dollars. So if you have money and you want to do that, that would be amazing. Yeah, and just follow us on all the things. Reimagine LA on basically everything, as you can see here. Yeah, and this is just some information about our campaign steering committee, which I think is important to identify. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we have BLM, we have Community Coalition, or COCO, we have Dignity and Power Now, which is Patrice Cullors' organization, who's also one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. Lots of amazing folks like Black and Brown and Indigenous leadership that is really steering all of this, pun actually not intended, but are really leading the way for us on this steering committee. And like Eunices and Isaac are some folks we've been working really closely with. They're amazing. I think that's basically it. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen now. Sorry if we went a little bit over time, I apologize. But we'd love to open it up if folks have questions. I know we just rolled out a lot of information, so maybe we'll open it up now.
Um, this is going to sound like a silly question, but how are we going to find this on our ballots?
That's not a silly question at all. In fact, I'm really glad that you asked that, because Measure J, by nature of how we got this on the ballot, is Natana's like, it's it's going to be the very last thing on your ballot. So please don't get ballot fatigue. It will be the very last thing on there, but maybe that'll make it like all the more worth you making it through all the other propositions and all the other things. Is that what you meant specifically? Like, where will it be on the ballot, or did you mean something else?
Even just kind of that, you know, like I know I can't speak for everyone here, but you know, typically when it's a voting year, you know, like I'm, you know, one of those people that votes for the president but doesn't always vote for my local officials and stuff like that. And so I want to become better about voting for local officials and voting for props and measures and stuff like that. And so it's just kind of like how, you know, basically where, yeah, just where do I find this on the ballot? How do I do it? Yeah, just help me to like be prepared to know how to how to make sure that I'm putting my ballot and my vote behind this.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And what I would say too, just about like logistical things to also support folks, is like ballots will be getting automatically mailed to you if you're registered. They're going to come on October 5th, which means it probably will actually arrive in your mailbox on like October 6th. I would recommend getting them filled out and in as soon as possible, to just do mail-in ballots. Now, that being said, you still are allowed to vote in person. So you can show up on November 3rd if you want to vote. If you are yet to be registered, no shame in the game. It's okay if you're not registered. We can always get you there. You have until October 19th to get registered to vote, to do it online. If you want to do it in person, say you literally are like thinking about it, or you know somebody who needs to get registered, and up until the day of, even until 5 p.m. on November 3rd, you can still register in person at a polling location. So if you know folks, make sure they're registered, make sure they know about all the dates. I would really recommend trying to get mail-in ballots in before November 3rd, because yeah, I don't know. It's just really crazy times right now. And like all these different mail-in centers and stuff, I would probably recommend doing it as quickly as possible. Sorry if that was too much information. Just want to put it out there.
I just saw another question pop up on the chat, I think from Emily. And the question was, hold on, give me a second. How do you think LA should promote mental health within our educational system so that our youth can obtain the resources and outlets they need to stay emotionally healthy? I can actually speak personally to this. And this is an anecdote / a just response with context to what your inquiry was. I grew up in New York City, and I was in a public school that was horribly overcrowded. There were a lot of us squeezed into the classroom. I think that my kindergarten class was the size of, and I'm 31 right now, this was the early 90s, so I would say like 35 of us in a classroom. There were so many. And I've always had a lot of energy. I've always just been very intellectually curious. I've wanted to have my hand in everything. I don't remember this, but I was speaking on the phone with my mother 2 weekends ago, and she said, you know that they wanted to put you on medication for ADHD just because you were bouncing everywhere and you weren't, as soon as you finished your work, you would just go to the next thing. And they wanted to just, instead of figuring me out and instead of leveling with me, this 6-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever boy, they wanted to immediately medicate me. That was a white kindergarten teacher, a white female kindergarten teacher who wanted to automatically do that to me. I'm glad that it didn't happen because my mom pushed back. And I heard that my first grade teacher, Miss Williams, actually said, Charlie doesn't have anything wrong with him. He just likes to have his hand in multiple pots. So she gave me all of my work for the week at once to keep me mentally preoccupied, and that calmed me down because I had something to do. It wasn't that I had something that needed to be medicated. It's that I needed more creative thinking and more attention to who I was as a person to solve the problem. I didn't need a quick fix of, oh, and here are some meds. So I think that if we're gonna really address this, and thank you for indulging me on that, because I know we do have time to burn through, but we really just need to have small classroom sizes. We need to have teachers who are trained in dealing with different personalities. We need to have, and this is, I think I might get pushback for saying this. I think we also need teachers who have familiarity with the communities that they're teaching. I think that that's a big, big thing. That's a part of it, because if you don't know the community and you really haven't been part of it and you're coming into this environment, even if you are extremely well-meaning and have a good, pure heart and want nothing but the best for those kids, you're gonna have blind spots. You're gonna have things that you do that can inadvertently harm the children in that system that you're trying to better. So I really do think that more mindfulness in our education system, more training, more, and I have such a love-hate relationship with the word diversity because it's kind of become so, it's like saying you like pop music at this point. It's super vague. It's like pop music is a lot of things. Diversity is a lot of things. But I think diversity and inclusion training in our school systems, starting from pre-K through 12, is big, because if you don't understand something, you are going to mishandle it and potentially scar the people that you're supposed to be nurturing and helping in those communities that are unfamiliar to you. Did I answer your question? I feel like I just ranted.
No, yeah, you did. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you, Charlie. Natana, I know you've been patiently waiting to ask a question. I'm sorry I missed your hand earlier on.
No, you didn't miss it. It was right after Emily asked her question. Okay, so I have a couple things because I've been delving into Measure J. I was just on a call with Eunices Hernandez on Wednesday, who is one of the chairs for this. So I have a couple of sort of clarifying questions that I'm still a little unclear about. And I also wanted to like at least be correct in how I'm understanding this as I'm about to do these calls. So the first one is that this is not impacting LAPD funding at all because it is a county measure, and the county funds the sheriffs, not LAPD. So that's the first. I think that's accurate. Please correct me if that's wrong. So that's my first thing. The second one is my understanding is there's a certain amount of money that has to go to the sheriffs that this charter amendment will not actually impact. This is what I heard from a district attorney, which means that they're concerned that this budget reallocation is actually going to impact their jobs and the work that they do. So I'd love to get some clarity on that. The third one, which is really frustrating, is that I also heard that the probation actually is sitting on a bunch of money for social services that they haven't used at all. And no one knows. This is from Eunices. She said this. They don't know why they don't use that money, which is actually intended to have the same impact that Measure J is supposed to have, but they're just sitting on it, which leads me to believe that this is the first step in the process of demanding this funding is used for social services. Just to pass this isn't enough. That transparent process is super key and crucial to making sure that money isn't being handed to the cronies that gave the campaign money to the supervisor, but actually is being used for what our intentions, the voters' intentions are. So I know that was a multi-part thing, but those are my clarifying questions.
I was with you on all of it. And thank you for each and every one of those questions / statements at points, because it was all really important, I think, for folks to hear. And you're right. So the LAPD is budgeted or paid for by the city of Los Angeles. Any sort of funding reallocations that we're talking about on a county level would have nothing to do with that. There is perhaps a conversation that I guess that leads into your second question, right? Thinking about like, does this actually impact the sheriffs? And you also are right already in that nothing about this charter amendment is saying we're taking anything from any one particular program or agency. What it is saying is that we are going to ensure that at least 10% of our revenue are going directly to direct community investments and alternatives to incarceration. Nowhere in the language does it say where we're taking that money from. It is just making a commitment to our communities that we're going to guarantee that at least that amount of money goes into there. I think there was a second part to that question you asked specifically. And the third one was about, I thought I was with you. No, I'm not. What was the third thing?
The third one was that this is just the first step, because probation has money that it doesn't use. So how, we need to do more after this too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's what we see happening as underinvestments, or we see folks that are, as you mentioned, like programs that are sitting with money and they're waiting to be spent, that it's just not getting allocated, right? And I think you're completely right on the money. And Eunice is talking about, we need transparency, we need oversight, we need to understand where our funds are going, or we need to have at least a participatory budgeting process. Participatory budgeting processes are one of the most democratic things that you could possibly do, and one of the most equitable things you could possibly do. However, they are basically non-existent all across the country. So that's why this is a really huge deal. It sets precedent in so many different ways, but that part in particular that Natana is hitting on is a really powerful one, that we're actually inviting the community into this process to say, and not just the community, I should be more specific and not obtuse about it, like impacted communities, to say low-income folks get a seat at the table, Black folks get a seat at the table, brown folks get a seat at the table, just poor folks in general, right? Also, because like oftentimes, sorry, and I'm gonna get off my soapbox in a second, but like what we're talking about when we're talking about justice a lot, or we're talking about housing justice, we're talking about a war on poverty, right? It was what ends up happening. We criminalize poverty all the time, poverty that's created through systemic oppression, systemic racism, and all these things. And so this is an opportunity for communities to say, no, actually, like if you would give us more resources and you would make investments in our communities and stop over policing us and stop starving us of resources, we can actually thrive. So anyway, all that's to say, yes. Any other questions or anything in the chat? Oh, I just wanted to really quickly, and I swear I'll stop after this, I've been talking a lot, but Emily, I just really appreciated your question earlier because I wanted to, and I really appreciated Charlie sharing your experience. It's so powerful. And I wanted to build off of that and say, you know, we see these things everywhere. This isn't restricted to just housing. This isn't restricted to just talking about charter amendments. And your question is very well received because this same thing is happening in schools, right? We're not investing in mental health. We're investing in policing folks. Like we have school resource officers with guns that are armed in schools that are addressing behavioral problems when children need access to mental health services, children need access to caseworkers, children need access to restorative justice programs, right? We're treating children, young children, as criminals or some sort of like disturbing like case studies from the time they're babies, you know, elementary school children. And that is not how we create thriving communities. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated that question because this is happening everywhere. But I think that's, yeah, I think maybe we should wrap it with that. But I just want to say I appreciated that. All right, should we jump into the actual action part of this? Yay, we feeling excited? You're feeling nervous? It's totally okay if you're also feeling nervous. Do we have any new phone bankers, by the way? Has anyone not phone banked? You have no idea what this is like. You are brand new. We got Jane maybe saying yes. We got Brian saying brand new. I see a couple of brand news. Eunice. That's great. Well, listen, even if you're not brand new, what I wanted to say at the top of this is like, we all get nervous. Like, this is a big deal. We're talking about important things. We're also talking to strangers. So we are in this together. Charlie and I are not going to let you be alone. If at any point you have questions, you'll have an opportunity when you get into the software that you can stop and you can check in with us. Let us know how things are going. Let us know if you need support. There's a script that is available to you, as you'll see, but I just want you to know you're not alone. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. So we're going to be using a thing called Hub Dialer. So, oh, also I should say, do folks have access to, I'm assuming you have a computer and a phone available? Hopefully. Okay, great. So on your computer, and I'll actually walk through this with you, you're going to go to hubdialer.com as you see here on my screen, and everyone will have the same campaign ID and password. Maybe if it's helpful, I'm going to go ahead and just drop this in the chat too, so that way you have it once we're like getting into the calls in case you get disconnected or something like that. I can support you. There we go. Oops. All right, so you'll go to hubdialer.com, which is this little thing right here. We got this lady who seems really excited, but she also might work at a call center and not for a campaign at all. It's very sort of simple. The good news about hubdialer.com is it makes it very easy for you. So we're going to go to sign in as a volunteer. All of you all are probably new to Hubdialer, so you'll actually need to put in your email. So we'll do Caleb at everyoneinla.org, and then we're going to go back. And so I pasted that campaign ID and passcode. You'll just put them in there. So you got that. There's our campaign ID. And then we're going to throw our password in there, which is this 898989. Okay, so now I'm actually going to do this live with you really quickly. It's going to give me a phone number to call. Okay, so this is why, and this is really important to note. So your phone, once you're on this software and you're logged in online on the browser, your phone and your browser are communicating. You'll actually make the first call from your phone. I'll show you in a second. We're gonna call. Do not hang up your phone at any point. You don't need to. Like basically, your phone's gonna be communicating with the browser. So after you finish a phone conversation with someone, they're like, you know what, Caleb, that sounds amazing. It's a yes on J for me. I'm going to click it on the browser and then we'll click next script. You never have to do anything on your phone after you have made the first call. So do not hang up. However, if you do, we will walk you through it. It's all good. We're going to get through it. So here's just a little bit of information, how it works. So as I said, you'll connect over the phone. You'll dial the number that's going to be displayed. When you confirm you're ready, basically you'll hear hold music. That'll be playing the whole time. You'll see a waiting screen. Then the hold music will stop and you'll actually see the call script, as I'm going to show you here below. You see Leilani Ramos. And when you're ready to dial, actually click the make call button. Okay. I think it's actually maybe just easier if I just like jump into it. But this is sort of what your script is going to look like. You'll see a person's name. You'll see their party affiliation, which is not really that important. Your gender and their age, and then you're going to have your little script, right? You also can do variations of this. Try to keep it brief, and I would recommend, because oftentimes when we're doing phone banking, you're not going to get a lot of time with the person. They might say, Caleb, why are you calling me? What do you need? So we want to try to make sure that we get the ask in as soon as possible, and maybe even try to resist the urge to say, hey, my name is Caleb. I'm a volunteer with the S1J. How are you doing? Or do you have a few minutes of your time? They might say, absolutely not. And so my one question that I've asked now is, do you have some time? Rather than saying, are you going to vote yes on Measure J? And just getting straight to the point. So while I know that we're all very nice and very cordial in phone banking, sometimes you want to just like minimize that time. So this is what the script looks like. You can say a variation. I say something to the effect of, hi, my name is Caleb. I'm a volunteer with Yes on J. You know, Yes on J is a huge opportunity to address racial injustice by investing in healthcare and housing and jobs in Black and brown and low income communities. Do you think we can vote on you or count on you to vote yes on J in November? And they might say, yes, I already know about it. That's great. So what you will do is you're going to click yes. You'll click that yes button. If they say no, absolutely not, just say no. You don't need to try to convince them. The name of the game is we want to try to hit as many callers as possible. We obviously have some limited time here today. Once I'm done with this, we'll probably only have about 30 to maybe 45 minutes tops to do that. So you don't need to try to like get into a persuasive conversation. If someone says, I need to know more, to say that is completely okay. If you want, you can try to ask them again. This is not a task. We have all these scripts here for you. But if someone seems like a little bit frustrated and they just want to get off the phone, like, I don't know, I need to read more. Sorry, Natana, like, I got to go. Just be like, no worries. Like, if you want to visit yesonj.la, get more information, you know, it's there for you. Have a great day. Take care. Hang up the phone. So I'm actually going to show you how it works really quickly, and then we're going to set people off. So I'm going to call in. I'll put it on speaker so you can hear me. 9146. So it's gonna ask me to enter this. Completed as dialed. Okay, Caleb, you got this. 703-546-9146. So I'm gonna have to enter this dialing code followed by pound. You'll hear it ask me that. Welcome to the hub dialer. Enter your dialing code followed by the pound sign. And now it's going to give me another 3-digit code, which you'll hear right now. Calls may be monitored for quality control. Your confirmation code is 642. Go ahead. Enter your confirmation code into your web browser. Great. So we are in, at this point, you don't need to do anything else on your actual cell phone device. So I will actually hit make call on my browser, and I'll call Diana right now, and this might be cringeworthy. She may yell at me, we don't know. But we'll call Diana up. We'll talk to her, like give her the whole spiel. If for whatever she responds, I'll show you how to do all these. Let's just do it. How about that? She may not answer. Okay, so Diana didn't answer. Please leave your message. So we're getting her voicemail. We're gonna click voicemail, or you can also click no answer, and then you just click next script. And then as you'll notice, my phone just starts. Press the make call button in your web browser. And then we just call, and it rings again. So we'll try one more time, and then we'll see if Daniel answers. I think Daniel's gonna answer for me. He knows I'm doing a demonstration. Great question. No, we are not.
Hi, you've reached Daniel Ortega. Please leave your name and contact.
So yeah, we're not leaving voicemails. Now the main campaign, like Yes on Measure J, the folks like Youth Justice Coalition and things like that, they actually, I think, have automated messages that they've programmed in. We're not leaving voicemails with our particular calling that we're doing through everyone in. So if you get someone's voicemail, you can just click voicemail or click no answer, and then you'll just click next script and keep it going. But that's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. And I think really quickly, I'll say this, and then I'll stop sharing screen and we'll get folks going. You'll see a series of choices here. When you're calling through, you will actually get numbers that are not connected. You will get numbers that are incorrect. Someone will say, this is not Jessica's phone number. She does not live here. Obviously, you can just select that here and then click next script. If it's busy or any of these other things, you just hit next script. There is one other thing to watch out for, is that it might ring and then it might go silent, or it might even make a beep and then go silent. If that happens, you just click down here on technical issue, and then you'll actually just report it, say whatever the thing is, send it, and then it'll allow you to hit next script after that. So I hope that's sort of clear.
Maybe you should temper people's expectations of how many calls they're gonna probably get directly to.
That is, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, it'll end up being a lot of no answers. It'll end up being a lot of voicemails. Do not take it personally if people are getting a lot of calls right now. It's campaign season. We're literally 45 days away from a really, really big election. So people are calling for all of the things. So if someone calls and says, you know what, I'm really sorry, Jane, I don't have time right now, I gotta go. Don't take it personally, and just say, oh yeah, thank you so much, because we're trying to hit as many voters as possible. We just want to get people on the phone. But yeah, as Natana mentioned, it'll be a lot of just like ringing and voicemails and all the things, but just keep pushing through. Yeah, and the yeses make it worth it, because there are some people that are going to be so thankful that you called them and let them know, because some people will get education, you know, and as I was showing you, you'll have a script right there. So if you have a moment, someone will ask you, they'll say, Natana, I need to know more, like, what is Measure J? You'll have the script right there for you to give them a brief little question. And then what I would just recommend is, after you say that sentence, just make the ask one more time and say, do you think you're going to vote yes on Measure J, after you give them the answer to their question. I hope that's clear. But
quick question.
Of course.
What do we respond for volunteer with? LA Reimagine or?
Yeah, you can say LA Works, whatever you would like, whatever feels comfortable. You can say LA Works, or you could say yes on J. Whatever comes out, they're not going to question you on it. All right, should we try to get logged on? Do folks feel ready? All right.
Caleb, do you want me to send that FAQ sheet that you sent over in the chat?
Yes. I'm also happy to drop it too if you want me to do that.
I have it copied, so I might as well.
Sure.
But this will just be, let's see. So hopefully everyone has access to that, but that's just sort of an informational document with some of the frequently asked questions that may come up as you're calling, or just for, you know, your own purposes. Do you have anything else that you want to say about that?
No, I think that's perfect. The only other thing I'll say, and I swear I'll stop talking, is that you might have folks that are monolingual. So if you're able to speak in Spanish or any other language outside of English, and you can sort of translate real time and do it, awesome. I know that all folks are not able to. I just want to remind you that you can actually mark that on the web browser. You can put language barrier and then put whatever language they might speak, if you can deduce that. Mostly folks are monolingual Spanish speakers. But I think that's basically it. Yeah, thank you for dropping that FAQ sheet.
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna do now is take the next 35 minutes or so and sort of split off and work on our phone banking. If you have any questions that come up as you're doing your calls, myself and Charlie and Caleb and Nisha will all be around. So feel free to message us in the chat with any questions that you might have. And we're going to be sort of, you know, doing this independently. So you know, you can feel free to leave your camera on as you're making your calls, but you know, you can also turn it off, make sure that your mics are off, because we'll all sort of be calling together at the same time. Yeah, I think unless there are any other questions, does that make sense to everyone? Can I get some thumbs up or?
Could you just clarify what the web address is for the hub dialer
Yep, I think Caleb just sent it in the.
in the chat?
Yeah, there's
Yep.
a clickable
Oh, I
link.
got it. Okay, because when I go there, it doesn't look like the screen
And
that
I'm
you
gonna
showed us.
Gotcha. That one should work now. And then I'm gonna drop the campaign ID and password again. And so that's what you'll enter. And just make sure that you enter your email. Since you're new to Hub Dialer, you'll enter your email first and then the campaign ID and the password.
Okay, got it.
Great. So I'd actually love to invite everybody to go ahead and mute themselves, and we'll all rejoin back here to discuss how things went at 1:45. So everyone, good luck, Godspeed. You're going to be fantastic. Caleb and Charlie armed you all very well to be able to take this on. And we look forward to hearing about your experiences at 1:45.
Hey, Jane, do you still need some support?
Yeah, I put it on the web browser on my laptop, but it won't, nothing is working there. So it's on the laptop, and then once I get a phone number, then I use my cell phone. I've been trying, I've not been successful. I'll try again. Okay. Okay. Meeting. Updagger.com. Let's see what my problem is. Let's get started. Okay, 703. 546. 9146. 541. 031. See, I get they call. Oh, is this it? Okay, I mean, okay. Come on.
Sorry, Jane, I did not realize I had my audio muted. You probably were trying to talk to me. I feel terrible. I was like, where's Jane?
Caleb, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I think I'm finally getting it. I put it in there, and then I realized I just have to make the call. You see, when I put it in the web browser, I am disconnected and I get Google search. So I guess to just put it in and then just make the call, because now, as you were showing up on my screen, I heard the phone of this person. No.
Do you still have your cell phone is still connected, right?
No, I disconnected it as you were trying to talk to me.
Oh, yeah. So you have to keep that's the one tricky part about it is you'll actually leave your phone dialed the entire time, and then you actually will operate all of the things on the web browser. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's the laptop rather than the phone. I just use the phone to talk to the person. Got it. That was not clear.
My apologies. Yeah, that's how it works.
You know, I am such a beginner, so that's the reason. So now I think I will get it for next time.
Well, there will be many other opportunities, and that's what this is about, is learning. I apologize. I didn't realize my audio was muted earlier. I could have probably helped you sooner.
And also I was trying to get help. So I was trying to get back on Zoom, but I was not let in until just now. So let me get back on Zoom. Let me back in.
Oh, you're in. I think you just need to turn
Yeah,
your
and
video
I
on.
just don't see you guys.
A lot of us have our cameras off right now, Jane.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, can you see me, Jane? I'm here.
No, not at all. It's just the Zoom blank page when system dialog prompts, click open, and I click open, and I'm not being let in yet.
Oh, okay. You're here. So I think it's just a lot of people have their cameras off right now. Because me and Caleb, we have our cameras on right now. As such as Gwen too. So we're here. You're in. Don't worry. Right now we're not coming back until 2 more minutes, okay? So
Yes,
we're here.
yes, fine.
I think someone kindly set a timer for us to come back at 1:45.
All right, if everyone can start sort of finishing up your last phone call and make your way back to the Zoom and turn on your cameras if you're able.
And once we all are back, we'll just talk about our experiences before we end the session today. But I want to hear from all how the experience went, and especially since this is the first calls that we made with this opportunity, and we may be making calls in the future. So if you wasn't able to make a lot of calls or get a lot of answers when you call, no worries, we'll make calls in the future. But I want to hear from you all if it's possible, like your experience, how it went first time around.
I'll start. Am I unmuted? I can't tell.
Yes, sorry, I'm muted. Yes.
Awesome. My experience was fantastic. I actually got a few people, and the people that I spoke to, I just gave them the brief thing, and they were like, "Oh, that sounds like something that I might be in favor of." And I was like, "I can tell you more about it if you can give me 20 seconds, I promise." And then I just gave them, a really quick spiel. And then they were like, "Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good. You can count on my vote." And I was like, awesome. So for me, the key was just being like, I promise I can fill you in 30 seconds or some, short amount of time. And no one said no to that when I told them I could share it in 30 seconds. So.
Thank you for sharing, Denise. I had the same experience. I made a couple calls, and at first I got kicked out or logged out, so then I had to get back in. And that experience was pretty cool. Like I got a hold of like a good amount of people, and I got a lot of yeses. Actually, I was like, all right, cool. And then they were like, yep. And I was like, wait, so you want more about it? And they're like, yeah, I can learn more about it. And I'm like, and I gave them the whole like what it's about, and they're like, yeah, you got my vote. And I just felt, I don't know, I felt I don't know, motivated. And then when I saw 145, I was like, wait, no, like I'm just so yeah, I'm excited for the future calls. Like it was really, fun. So like, try they really trained us and got us on the right step. So thank you so much, you too. Um,
Looks like Gwen made a ton of calls and actually talked to 5 live people.
Gwen, this was my first Gustavo. Um, Gustavo made a comment. All right, thank you, for sharing your experience. I'll read it out loud. This was my first time. I was very nervous and I tripped up the first time. Some people just hung up, but some also answered, and I was able to get a yes. I feel as though I should be more aggressive on my approach the next time around I do this. Okay. Thank you for sharing, Gustavo. Yes, it's your first time around, so if you didn't get any answers or people hung up, don't feel discouraged.
Yeah, and
it's
going off of that, my philosophy about phone banking and really about a lot of things in life in general is rejection is something you have to get out of the way to reach a win. So all of these calls that you're making, just get them out of the way so that you can have a good call. Because if you keep at it and you're persistent, and if you have 30 calls that you made and you connect with 2 people and only one of them is a good conversation, that was the goal for you going through all the rest of the calls. It's like dating, but yeah, that's my philosophy.
Does anyone else who's phone banking for their first time want to talk a little bit about what that was like? You can raise your hand or raise your virtual hand if you know how to do that in Zoom.
Well, it was my first time, and so I was kind of like keeping a tally like on my iPad to see like how many people I've gonna be talking to and how many people actually answered. And I actually got like 3 yeses, and I was like quite surprised. And your PowerPoint really helped me to like persuade them to like say yes and like get more information out, because even though the script was like pretty concise and like easy to understand, they still wanted more information, and I was like, oh, like referring back to your PowerPoint. So thank you guys for this experience.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say you all did amazing. I was looking at the numbers and I was sharing a little bit of like updates in the chat, but you all called nearly 500 people, and out of the 500 people, obviously those weren't all humans, but you made 500 calls and 53.5% of people said yes. So that's really, really good. That means like if this were a ballot, that would be a win, right? So that's really amazing. Also too, I wanted to, not to put people on the spot, but just from like we're always trying to learn too. Is there any way that Charlie and I could have like supported you better, or we could have like rolled out the information better? Like we always want to make sure that we like fine tune and refine this and make it feel as accessible for everybody. So if you have any sort of feedback, I'd love to hear it too.
Yeah. To echo off, we had one.
Well, no, it looks like, sorry, Jane was trying to talk, but you're on mute right now, Jane.
Muted myself. There we are. Okay, I will respond. I'm the only senior on the screen, and I am not techie oriented at all. And so somehow I was under the impression I had to use both the phone and the laptop, and I was using the laptop, but then I had a difficulty understanding, the web browser, and I did it, but it didn't work. So I think when Caleb and I talked towards the end, he had said earlier, do not hang up on your phone, but somehow because things were not working, I did. So I think to maybe, if there is ever a future new session for people, to just say, stay on your laptop and then go on your phone. Something like that maybe. So, but anyway, I'm learning.
Thank you, Jane. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's really helpful. That's exactly what we're looking for. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Jane, for sharing that, and also just acknowledge that it's so awesome that an opportunity like this allows for so many of us with differing levels of knowledge and experience when it comes to technology or advocacy or really any of the things that we're dealing with today. I appreciate your willingness to try things out for the first time, and I'm so thankful to all of you for sticking with us, throughout technical difficulties or just a little bit of nerves and anxiety or whatever it may be. So thanks for giving it a try. And now the next time you phone bank, you will be such a pro. And I promise in due time. And was there anything else I wanted to say about that? I feel like I had something else to say, but I just wanted to highlight this comment from Ashley in the chat about language barriers. I guess I'll just read this out loud. I was kicked off the site twice. LOL. Once I got back in, there were many times when I had to end the call because of the language barrier. I'm not fluent in Spanish, so I felt bad. I did talk to some really great people who wanted to learn more. So overall, it was a great first phone banking experience. I'm so glad that you had a great first phone banking experience. I'm sorry that the language barrier, of course, does complicate things and make it difficult. But again, thank you for just sort of sticking with it and doing your best no matter what. And I'm really glad that you had a good experience with it. Does anyone else want to share a little bit about how today went?
Not, I'll wrap it up. However, anyone want to share last comments before I wrap it up and go on about our afternoons?
I just want to thank Caleb and Charlie. It's always so heartwarming to know that we're in this fight together. I think sometimes we can feel really discouraged, especially because this week was a lot of blows, to feel like, we can still do something that is important, and it's important to do that thing. And so I know you guys are warriors in the field, and I'm just so heartened by the fact that you guys are there. So just saying thank you to you guys.
Of course, we're all there together. I like opportunities like this, and thank you for tapping me to do this, Caleb. It was a great experience, but we're all doing the fight, and sometimes it can be a little disheartening, like you mentioned, moments this week. But when we build solidarity, we can draw fuel from each other and moving forward, because it is a group effort, and there are people in your community that you can lean on and just garner different things from. So thank you, and also right back at you.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say thank you all so much too. Thank you to Tanisha and Marissa and Denise and Atana and each and every one of you that is on this call. Like, even if it was your first day, I hope you feel empowered now, because that's also what this is about, is that I hope that what you learned today extends beyond this conversation, and you're able to now have some conversations with other people in your life, whether they're friends or family or congregation members or neighbors in your building. You now are a part of this with us. And so we're really grateful for you and really grateful for what you brought to this campaign and to this moment today. So thank you, and just want to show my gratitude.
All right. Thank you all for coming out today, and I want to thank the presenters, as I stated earlier. I just want to give a few announcements, or just let you all know that we have our third session next week, which is 9/27/2020, same time, 12 noon, and that session will be talking about the affirmative action Prop 16 and how to write and op-ed it. So we just want to make sure that we talk about that, because that's very important. A lot of people are unaware about Prop 16 and what exactly it is, so we want to make sure that we talk about that next week, 9/27. So make sure you all sign up for that on LA Works. The same way that you sign up for today, the same way you sign up for that one next week. That'll be session 3. And also in the wrap-up email, or my thank you email, because I'm very gracious of you all coming out. We're gracious for that. I'll be sending out a survey. So please complete the survey. That'll assist us. And as I mentioned before, I think we are grateful for you all for coming out today and learning with us. It was a pleasure to have you all.
And if I may, before everyone disappears, we always like to take a kind of a group picture of everyone because again, you know, we don't have a ton of community right now. So I would love to just get a picture of all of these amazing human beings who are some of the best people in Los Angeles, all in one room at the same time. So yeah, I'd love to get a picture of everybody. So, you know, on the count of 3, just give me your best, you know, blue steel or your, you know, best duck face. Do people do duck face anymore? I don't know. But anyway, we're all here together. Let's remember it. Okay, so 1, 2, oops. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for showing up and letting me get a picture.
Also, if you're a high school student and you want your volunteer hours verified, I send my email in the chat. Please feel free to email me and I can help you out. But thank you all so much for coming. I hope to see you next week. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Yeah, have a good one, everyone.
Bye, all.